Jim, here's your hand. Here we go. Hello, gang. Give people a couple more minutes to catch up. Boy. Good to be back online. Good to be back doing a live broadcast, y'all. Okay, we'll get official then. This is Dan's Art Adventure number 8, very low number. I'm working on it. And this is Sara and Joe, Acrylic Stages. All right, so some of you regulars, when you watch this, you'll recognize the name Foxhole Willie, one of our regular friends here on my channel. He's already here. All right. Got to make some coffee. Excellent, excellent. Jim. So Foxhole Willie's real name is Jim. And Sara is his daughter. And so I'm excited about doing a painting for another broadcast friend. What fun. So we'll pick you up just for a second, and here's the photo reference I'm working from. This is a composite in Photoshop. I've written a couple of images. And the canvas here is 24 by 36. And because, so the top, it's real simple. The top is cool. The bottom is warm. Therefore, generally speaking, in my underpainting, I will want the bottom to have more cool colors, the opposite of what the finished painting is going to be. So the bottom will have more cool, and the top will have more warm. And if anybody's watching this, if you haven't seen me or haven't seen me in a long time, maybe, little explanation about why in the world do I start my representational paintings with this crazy abstract nonsense? That is a very good question. Not terribly easy to answer. It is a good question. All right, a couple ways to answer it. One, in not trying to impress anybody, I'm a pretty good drawer. That is, you know, I can capture a subject matter. Whoops, hang on. I have to get down on the floor. Turns out I'm nearly out of acrylic paint, white. Didn't realize it. So let's get some acrylic white out here. There we go. The sound of acrylic paint being. All right, why do I do abstracts? And it's going to say, the reason I'm starting by mentioning that I'm a pretty good drawer is that I do recognize that for many student early journey painters, you know, realistically capturing the subject is a major focus and a major concern. In fact, a major anxiety, right? Oh, I'm worried that I'm not going to get it right, kind of stuff. And if I'm not talking about you, that's all right. I'm talking about a significant portion of the thousands students I've taught over the last 20 years. Very focused and worried about capturing whatever it is they're painting. And that's, again, very realistic concern. I'm not knocking it. That's right. Okay. Since I'm not worried about, I don't have that stress, I don't share that stress. Well, I do when it comes to the faces and the portrait, but you'll see that in later broadcasts. And that's just a matter of hard work. That's just a matter of time and process and so on and so forth. But I'm not worried about capturing. Therefore, I throw myself as many curveballs as I can. Sort of like, okay, smarty pants, draw on top of this. That's a little bit of a silly reason for why I do an abstract. One of the reasons I do is, golly, isn't that pretty? If you don't think that's pretty, something's wrong. All these things, little intricate things that the paint does all by itself, you know, without your permission, you know, all this running, everything, just fun. All right. A more important reason is because I want some of these pretty accidents showing through in the final painting. Another way to put it is, not much of this will show through, of course. I'm always wishing more did show through. But as I go through the steps of painting, step A, B, C, D, E, these marks will influence my choices, where I put marks and so forth. And I'm going to do just a little bit more yellow here. It's a real discreet mark there, eh? Do you remember Bob Ross? I mean, of course you remember Bob Ross, but his number one, sorry about your hand there, Jim. You knew it wasn't going to last, didn't you? Bob's best quote, the one thing that he said often that was really good art teaching was happy little accidents. And I discovered at some point years ago that the best painting happened by accident. So Bob Ross's statement is quite seriously accurate. Once I discovered that the best strokes, the best marks I put on a canvas were almost always accidentally. It wasn't something I was doing on purpose. You following me? Once I discovered that, then in a sense I said, well then let's follow that through. Let's be consistent. If that's true, then you should make every mark by accident. Voila, that's what this is. Okay, so I start out my painting by creating a whole bunch of accidents, and I try to maintain that throughout the entire painting process. Allowing accidents to happen. All right, now, got my long brushes ready to go. I'm going to start drawing. And I'm trying to decide what color to start with. I guess pretty typical for me. Again, I'm going to start with orange. And I've got a horizon about here. And this arbor covered with flowers. I think it's right in the exact center, but I'm not going to measure. By the way, I consider these major marks that like I'm making right now, and of course I may very well move them. In fact, I'm going to move this one right now. I could, and some artists might measure, measure their photograph, again, which is up there above my painting that I'm looking at, and to make sure they get it in the right place and so on. And I feel like, for me, my intuition, in a sense, ignoring the photograph, except that I'm replicating that image, but as far as position, when I stare at this canvas, I think my own intuition about where this and that and these major lines should go is better than measuring the photograph. My job is really not to replicate the photograph in that sense. So I don't typically do any measuring, anything like that at this stage of the process. See, like I know there's a conscious choice right there. The angle that this is a wooden boardwalk, sidewalk going out a pier, going out into the water. And in the photograph, again, it doesn't have quite, it's a little bit more vertical. And I've splayed it out a little bit because I think that's better. So in this case, I think I make a lot of my early marks intuitively, and they are in fact mistakes, and that they're not accurate to the photograph. And again, I think most of the time those mistakes are intuitive and improvements, if you will. You know, I just have a sense where this line should go, and so on and so forth. This down here, where I mentioned the boardwalk, the dock, the pier, whatever you want to call it, wooden sidewalk on which the bride and groom are standing, that was a conscious violation, if you will, of the photograph. All right, good enough. Good enough for orange. Give those brushes a quick rinse. Hello, Uncle 60. Good to have you on board. You guys are not too far from each other, I think. Foxhole Willie, forgive me, are you New Jersey or Maryland? Up there somewhere. And Uncle 60's in New Jersey. Okay, same brushes. I'm going to draw now some more, making adjustments, corrections, adding a little bit of detail. Yeah, there's a board that goes sticking up in the air off that trellis. I don't know why, but I like it. I like that's a convenient thing to go off the canvas. Can you see it? I'm almost, hang on, let me adjust you a little bit. There we go. So just that mark right there, I think that's, and there's another skinny one over here. Those, and they're actually in the photograph. I don't know what they are. I don't know if there's a sign. I don't think so. No. Anyway, oh, maybe this is just a mast of a ship. That's what it is. Yeah, there's a boat back there that will barely be in the painting. Anyway, one of the things that those two marks right there going off the top of the canvas will help avoid the donut hole syndrome, which this scene is particularly susceptible to, because of course bride and groom totally focal point in every way, focal point psychologically and style of painting and so forth, but right around them is this arbor, I'm calling it trellis, there we go, with flowers on it, and it is such a defined shape, and it's all right angles and so forth, that if all parts of it were visible, that would be a bit of a donut hole. So the fact that a little bit of it goes off, this isn't really part of it, but it looks like it. If a little bit of it goes off the canvas, then that helps alleviate. We don't, I discovered this principle, this mistake, by making it. Maybe some of you know, when I'm not doing wedding paintings over the last 20 years, the most common subject matter for me to paint is cityscapes. And so I do a lot of square objects, because most buildings, houses or commercial or otherwise, most buildings are square-ish, right? And have very clearly defined outline. And I discovered that if the entire building, if there was one building that was the focal point, the focus of the painting, if the whole building was visible inside the bounds of the canvas, it felt like an architectural rendering, the kind of drawing an architect would do to sell his house to his clients. And it was because it was all contained. So I discovered if I had, the garage or the sidewalk or the chimney, or to use a house as an example, if I had some part of the, by the way, I'm making a slight change here. I'm going to, I think, lower this horizon about half an inch from what I did the first time around. That if I had some part of the building going off one edge or the other, that it made it feel better. And I call the mistake version of that the donut hole. There's an object, right? And it tends to be middle-ish on the canvas. All right, enough of that. I just mentioned, and that's part of the reason when I do my first drawing, I usually try to select a fairly light color. I don't do blue or purple or even red, because that allows me to come back and do darker color. So this red, as you can see, is darker than the orange. And so the orange, in a sense, disappears. And I will continue that process, going darker and darker for a few minutes here. And I'm not just retracing what I did in orange, duplicating or changing it and doing it again in red. No, I'm making judgments. And right up here I decided, you know what, I think it might be because I've got the bride and groom's heads positioned maybe. I think that the horizon should be a little bit lower. So, and I may change my mind again. I may make it go back up, or I may make it come down, right? So every time that I draw, I make adjustments. And here's an adjustment right here. And it changed my mind. This one board that I was telling you about, it really is here, but I think it's going to make more sense if it's here. So people, it won't confuse the viewer. And Jim, you could tell us what body of water is this? I'm assuming it's ocean, salt water. What, it's a bay of some kind. And there's a number of, certainly want it to feel like the ocean, whatever you call it, the coast, not the beach. At least for myself, I don't call this kind of setting beach. I call it the coast. To me, a beach is sand. But I can understand people go to this part of wherever this is. They might say, we're going to the beach. Maybe. Straighten us out here, Jim. Do they? You guys call this the beach? Solomon's Island, Maryland, yeah. No, Uncle, I did not ever yet get the new long bristle brushes. Oh, Foxhole, Jim, you got both Maryland and New Jersey. How about that? No wonder maybe I knew that. I heard that one time. I don't know. I think for those of us in the rest of the country, forgive us, Maryland and New Jersey, okay, yeah, sure enough, they tend to run together. Okay, so I'll let you get even. I grew up in Michigan, and here in the South, a lot of people, if they're, if geography is not one of their strong suits, like obviously New Jersey, Maryland is not one of my strong suits. Anyway, they remember that I'm from one of those northern Midwestern states that starts with the letter M, but for the life of them, they have a hard time remembering. Is that Michigan or Minnesota? Wisconsin. There's a bunch of cold states up there that start with the letter M, right? Mindiana. Oh boy. I was actually born in Canada. Proud to be a Canadian. I was naturalized right before Nancy and I got married, much to her relief. I was naturalized 40 plus years ago down in Fort Worth, Texas. That was interesting because everybody else in my graduating class, so to speak, of people becoming citizens, every other person I think was from Mexico, including not including by the way, Jim, there's a boat right here, like a classic 1950s, and I don't like it there, but I do like it, so I think I'm just going to move it out here, and I will probably, I hope at some point I'll do a little bit of research, so I make sure I don't mess up this boat. I think I can draw that from memory, but I'll go back and make sure. All right, so I was naturalized, but I was born in Canada, and and grew up mostly in Michigan. Whoops, hang on a second. That boat's too low. By the way, part of the reason I graduate to drawing in pencil is because I have an awful lot of sloppy, wet paint on this canvas. And the next thing I want to do is some glazes, and I can't do glazing while this painting is soaking wet. So, but I can draw with pencil, so it gives it several minutes to dry. Your daughter Sara is beautiful. Jim, of course. That old, I don't know, there's an old saying, something about a bride is always beautiful on her wedding day. Happily, that's one of those sayings or something that is true. It is true. I've done a lot of weddings, and a bride always looks radiant. Something is right with the world if a bride looks radiant on her wedding day. Okay, I've got something not quite right here, and of course that's to be expected. Let me show you a larger version of, I've made them too small. Let me double check that, is that right? Here's a print that I did of Sara and Joe with one crosshair, one real discrete line. I don't know if you can even see that. That's for measuring later. But at the moment, I'm glad I put that, because this is supposed to be the size they're supposed to be. So obviously my intuition, either I'm going to change it and make them closer to this size, or I've misjudged the size of the bride, and I think I've misjudged them somewhat. I discovered that that's a tendency that I have often in my drawing. Okay, so I was going to say I have photomechanical tricks up my sleeve. This is supposed to be actual size. It probably won't be, so I'll have to go back and print out another one of these in my office upstairs on my computer that matches the size of this, and then the crosshair. So there's methods, but why don't I just start then by drawing this line and start measuring everything. And the reason is because if you start out using any photomechanical tricks at all, often called cheating. Not by me. I'm kidding, that's a joke, because I have called it cheating for many years. But finally got talked out of using that word. But the reason for not using, just drawing, forgive me, I'm interrupting that. The reason for not using photomechanical tricks and tips right from the get-go is because your drawing skills deteriorate if you do that. So I pretty much always, when I'm at a wedding, I typically just draw shooting from the hip, so to speak. It's always a bit of a challenge to see how close can I get to, especially with the couple, with the portraits, how close can I get to accurate, realistic, without any help, without any photomechanical tricks, as I'm calling them. Oh, I forgot to do any indication of this trees. That's so funny that I eliminated that. Oh, here's a tip worth knowing. Uncle asked a question about water-soluble oils. Yeah, I have a whole set of them. I did a demo for Jerry's Artorama many years ago, where I did two paintings side by side, one in regular oil and one in water-soluble oil. And when I was done, I couldn't tell which was which without looking at the back where I had written oil there. But like you, they did seem a little bit stiff. I would call them, they are almost water-soluble oil. So a couple tips, kind of predictable. So if you use warm water and add a little soap to it, then they're water-soluble. All right, here's a tip that I give all the time. Anytime you have a horizon that's water in a painting, don't trust your eyeball. I mean, I think I'm pretty close here, but let's check. Yeah, close enough. But I am going to draw a line. If you're off just a 1/16 of an inch on a line like this, it will show up. Yeah, no, I'm plenty close enough. But while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and draw a line. So anyway, at least as here in my studio, I have a T-square. I use it for several things, but that's one. Just go ahead for a seascape, just use it. And I've learned that the hard way by looking at other people's paintings who did not do that and should have. Yeah, just don't even try. Don't even mess with it. Just go straight to a T-square, okay? That one line is the horizon on the ocean is always perfectly horizontal, not off by even a hair. So just don't mess with it. Don't waste time. Just draw. Use a T-square. Now, when I'm out in the field doing plein air, I will often use some means for measuring with a ruler or a triangle or something that I do carry in my plein air kit. It's almost dry, so I'm going to do this old trick. You regulars have seen this perhaps many times. I've got a brush here that's just barely damp. Hello, David. There are a few places where the acrylic paint was a little bit thick, and it hasn't dried yet, right? So what I'm doing here is smearing those thick bits so that they'll dry quickly. Got one way down here at the bottom. And as I tell my students, when you do this kind of action, it is absolutely imperative, in my opinion, absolutely imperative that you do movements like I just did. Two things. One, at an angle almost always works best. But you go fast and hard and all the way across the canvas. I can just picture and have seen my somewhat timid early journey painters, you know, kind of going, the tongue is important here. Do you like that action? I'm rough on early journey painters sometimes, aren't I? So no, that doesn't work. It has to be big, bold, fast, strong, long, strong and long. There you go, that's strong and long. The reason is, well, the sing-song is the principle stated in a truism is any stroke applied with enthusiasm and vigor is a beautiful stroke. Any stroke applied with timidity, overweening control, etc., is an ugly, but ugly stroke. There, not only ugly, but ugly. That's really bad. So don't do it like that. So like there's a pile of white left over from my abstract painting right here, right? So when I went like this, it made this streak. Well, look, I painted right across from a bride and groom. Yes, I did. But you know what? It's an attractive mark. So it's okay. There's just a little bit of energy. It's like a little bit of abstraction. Whereas if it was, I don't know, brushy is my description of bad painting. If it was brushy, it would be ugly. It would be ugly. All right, I think, ask me if this drives me crazy. Yeah, it does. Is there a better way? Yeah, it's called having a technical assistant. That's not going to happen. All right, forgive me. I'm back. Oh, hello, Dina. And you're asking Uncle. I do use mediums. I have used the mediums with the water-soluble oils, absolutely, as you can imagine, because in oils, I'm so hooked on liquid, right? So when I use the water-soluble oils, I use the comparable. All right, the only good thing about that just fiasco right there is that, as I said, everything on my canvas is now pretty much dry, so that's good news. I'm going to start doing some glazes now. Putting some phthalo blue on my brushes. Now my practice is a little bit of medium on the brushes. Oops, got runny. My practice typically is if there's a lot of sky in a painting, then I will do a complementary underpainting. In other words, at this point right here, instead of glazing in blue, I'd be glazing in yellow, pink, or orange. For those of you who are familiar with it, very much like Cape Cod School, a Cape Cod School of Painting sky, if I may say. A Cape Cod sky is what I would do if there's a lot of sky, but there's not a lot of sky in this painting, so therefore I do local color, that is to say blue, on the sky, and in this case sky and the water. The reason, the rationale, I'm assuming you can follow that, if there is a lot of sky in a painting, then the sky had better be pretty interesting, right? Make sense? If there's not a terrible lot of sky, then it can just be average, of average interest. And in my opinion, this painting, the sky's not a major issue, so just a nice sky is adequate. Whereas, again, if there's a lot of sky, the sky itself needs to be pretty interesting. I want to say spectacular. And a sky painted, underpainted in a complementary color. Again, that list was pink, yellow, and orange. If you want more details, just do a quick search for, not right now, I'm kidding, you can do whatever you want. Do a quick search for Cape Cod School or Cape Cod Painting, and you can find, I'm sure, somewhere a description of how to paint a sky in the Cape Cod technique. My buddy Mike Rooney, we paint together for a week every year. For many years he did. I suppose he still does, but he did the Cape Cod painting, and really, honestly, his own variation, his own twist, which I heartily affirm, by the way. I think everybody should do their own twist on whatever. You don't copy me, right? You can copy me for a painting or two at the most, but after that, you just do your own thing. So this is my first layer of white, which for some crazy reason I always just particularly tickled by. I just love doing this first layer of white, and it's almost always, if I can arrange it, it's almost always into wet paint, so that I'm creating a real nice soup. It's quite loose, as you can see. And part of the reason I enjoy the first layer of white so much, I enjoy subsequent layers of white too, but the first one is just, for some reason, it just seems like the most fun, is because it forces me, again, I've got the photo reference right there above my painting. It forces me to look at the reference photo through different eyes. Left to our own devices, people, artists and people will look at if we're copying a photograph or a scene, if we're standing out there with an easel, our eyes tend to focus on edges of things, right? That makes sense, right? We're painting, we want to get the boundaries in the right place and so on. That makes sense. And it's typically the edges of dark things is what our eye naturally gravitates to. Another way to say that is, left to our own devices, we will focus on the dark elements in a photograph or in a scene if we're playing on plein air without a photograph, right? That's just for some reason, that's what we do. In other words, it makes sense. We typically feel like the sky is more or less a blank slate, a blank plane, P-L-A-N-E, and we're painting stuff in front of the blank sky. So we don't see the sky as an object, we just see it as a backdrop, right? When you switch to doing light objects, all of a sudden you look at your photograph or the scene in front of you, if you're painting plein air, and you're looking for stuff that is light. Now, I always want to be careful when I say this. I'm not saying things that are light. No, wait, let me just said it wrong. I'm not saying things that are white with a W, W-H. What we're looking at things that are light. So forgive me, I said it wrong. We are not looking for white things like her dress. We're looking for light things. So that includes sand down here, the water, the sky, the boat in the background, and so on and so forth. So anything that's light. And I do find people that are new to my technique, they do get a little bit confused because they put white paint, I'm putting white paint on my brushes, and so then they think, oh, I should be looking for stuff that's white. No, you should be looking for stuff that's light. All right, enough of that. You guys are all regulars and you already know that. And the reason for painting into wet is because of happy little accidents, because you get all this, oh, I've got green paint on my brushes. That's a fun, happy accident. It really is. I'm going to leave it. Excuse me while I give these brushes a good swish, because I can't, you know this, don't you? You never want to leave brushes, wooden handled brushes, sitting in water, right? Not even for 5 minutes, because the water swells the wood stretches the ferrule deep. Both these brushes are old and very damaged from that very thing, but I don't want to damage them more. So do not leave your brushes. The oil painters don't have that same hazard, that same danger, because you can leave your brush sitting in Turpenoid or Gamsol. And as far as I know, neither of those cause the wood to expand. I think I'm right about that. It's certainly my intuition anyway. All right, I'm sharpening a couple pencils. Time for more pencil drawing. Let's bring this down a little bit. So isn't that, by the way, isn't that just a glorious mess? Let me bring you in here so you can just see some of the texture up close. Everything that's on the canvas right now, I will defend as good painting. And obviously, I'm not acting like a hyper-realist or very realist or tight realist painting, right? Painter. I am not acting like a tight realist painter when I say that this is good painting. And I've lectured on that subject till y'all are blue in the face, I'm sure. Now, if this is 24 inches, anyway, I think they're the right size. I'm wondering now if I've actually made this the wrong size, because it just seems too big to me. Yeah, I'm going to go with my intuition. So, I don't know if you know the confusion I'm dealing with right here, and I am confused. I'm wondering if in my Photoshop if I made a mistake printing this out. But in any case, this is the size that I'm going, because again, going back to what I said earlier, my intuition tells me that this is a good composition. I feel like if they were any bigger, it would be slightly uncomfortable, a less pleasing composition, okay? And want to make sure you get this then. My process. At the end of the acrylic stage, which is many minutes away yet, then when the size of their faces have been, and their bodies, but especially the faces, have been well established in my painting, then I will take this canvas. My computer happens to be upstairs in my other studio. Yes, I have two studios. And long story. Grace's wife. That's where my Photoshop computer is. And I will measure this, and I'll work in Photoshop, and I'll print out another one of these, the exact size of the painting. So again, if you're following me here, that's counterintuitive. Most of you would think that one would print off the reference first and then follow it, right? And that'll work. You know, watch Mark Carter, C-A-R-D, Carder, that's exactly what he does. He starts measuring right from the get-go, making little tiny hash marks on the cap. And he's a big dog, famous portrait painter, so I'm not comparing myself. I'm just saying that's a different approach. So what I'm saying is the opposite of that. I paint first, measure second. So to get their faces perfect, then I'll make another copy that matches this. All right. I just want that to be clear as mud, huh? All right, so I've got a lot of messy white wet paint, and oh yeah. I'm sorry, looking at your comment there, Jim Foxhole Willie. To show you what I'm doing, because I'm holding my pencil, old trick, at the angle of her face, right? Just like a traditional, just like if you look at any book or website or a video in the world about how to draw faces. By the way, the best ones in the world are, and now his name's, it'll come, Andrew Loomis. There we go. Andrew Loomis on Drawing the Head and Hands, I think is the name of that book. I've shown it to you often in my broadcast. Andrew Loomis and Jack Ham. Andrew Loomis worked in the 40s. Jack Ham worked in the 60s. Or George Bridgman, Art Student League of New York, in the 20s. Those are the three best. There's lots of other stuff that's good, but those are the three best how to draw a human being books, in my opinion, ever published. Again, Andrew Loomis, Drawing the Head and Hands, and also Figure Drawing for All It's Worth, two separate books. You can actually get free, it's tragic that this is available for free on download online, but it is. Andrew Loomis, Drawing the Head and Hands, and Figure Drawing for All It's Worth. Andrew Loomis was an absolute freak of nature in his drawing skill. I would say comparable to Rembrandt in his drawing skill, which is saying something, because as you know, I think Rembrandt is God. So to say Loomis is comparable is, for me, is saying something. Andrew Loomis. Next, George Bridgman. There's a number of books by him. They're all the same, but figure drawing, basically. And I would call him the father of American figure drawing. Now, I am making these, I'm drawing these guys bigger, probably because I'm using this reference right here. I'm going to stand back in a minute and see if I still agree, if I agree with what I'm doing right now. As you know, by the time I finish a painting, I will have drawn the subject 12 to 15 times. Now, I don't call glazes drawing, right? So they don't count as drawing. But when using a detailed, either small-ish brushes or pencil. And each time that I draw, I reserve the right, so to speak, to make corrections, modifications, improvements. So I'm not just tracing over and over and over and over. That would be understandably quite a waste of time. Let me back up now and see if I like what I've just done, because I have just changed the size of them. Yeah, I'm going to go with that. Again, I reserve the right to change my mind later in the process, but I'm going to stick with it for now. So I have in fact made them larger than they were. I'm standing across the room now. I have a feeling that his head is too big, so I'm going to make his head smaller again. Okay, leave that for a bit. By the way, here's a recent development in my painting, especially my wedding painting technique. For roughly the first 10 years that I did wedding paintings, I finished virtually every painting during the reception. Now that was before, as you can imagine, that was before I evolved into this place I am today, where I do virtually, a photorealistic portrait of their faces. So that is my standard operating procedure now. That the bride and groom's faces are completely detailed, realistic. Okay. But I used to finish anyway. So in the course of my evolving, then I've gotten slower and slower, as you can imagine, because doing the super accurate renderings just takes a lot of time, and because I don't finish them at the reception anymore, I never do. I bring them home to my studio, and because I'm not giving myself time now to get them right, I have really discovered the benefit of doing portraits over a length of time, days, weeks. and that is the traditional way of doing portraits, of course. It's take a lot of time, make a lot of changes, make a lot of refinements. Because of my particular weirdness, I've never allowed myself the luxury of painting for days or weeks. I've always just, a portrait in a day or 4 portraits a day, whatever. That's another story. But I've really discovered the value of working on a face, leaving it, walking past it a dozen times or half a dozen times over the next couple days with the photograph nearby, and looking and making comparisons, and then coming back and working on the face or faces for an hour or 2, and then looking at it again for a couple days. It turns out it really does work. And again, that's the classic, that's the way all the old masters worked. They didn't have all the benefit, all the tools and tricks that we have. They had some, but they didn't have phones and computers and Photoshop, of course. So anyway, that's a recent development for me. It's like, you know what? In spite of all my Dan Nelson do it fast tricks, it turns out doing it slow is really a good idea. All right, now the next step here is draw the painting, draw the subject again. This time, this is by far the smallest brushes that I'll be using. These are Silver Brush Company. I want to get a different one, different size in each hand. There we go. Certainly my favorite bristle brushes are Silver Grand Prix Long Filbert. 80% of my brushes fit that description. Again, Silver Brush Company, Grand Prix. They're the green handles and copper ferrule. And almost all my brushes, speaking of which, so let me show you. So there's my Tabaret, if you will. It is a early American apothecary, it's called. That means it's a drugstore filing cabinet that I've restored, and I've been using that as a Tabaret for over 30 years. Enjoyed it very much. Anyway, most of those brushes I just showed you are filbert. All right, I'm standing here and thinking where to start. Okay, I'm going to start with, I'm going to bust open the brown acrylic paint for the first time today. I don't open my, and let me show you for those of you who are not familiar with my style, my work, the way that I work, those are all pre-mixed acrylic, except for the white. The white is just straight out of the tube, so to speak. Pre-mixed acrylics. And I use cheap acrylics. Forgive me. Here, let me get a bottle. Because the biggest difference between cheap paint and good paint, the biggest difference is pigment content. And because all of my acrylics, except the white, I mix roughly 50-50 with an acrylic medium. Therefore, pigment content is not a big issue to me. Am I making sense? I don't care about pigment content because I'm going to, in a sense, water it down even more. So this is the stuff that I've been using for several years. It's big, it's cheap. With cheap paint, the only thing you have to watch out for is fading in UV light. You don't want it to be light paint that is not permanent, right? That's the one thing you do have to watch out. But as long as it doesn't, what's the word I'm looking for? As long as it's not fugitive is the word we use for that to describe fading in sunlight. As long as it's not fugitive, did I say that right? Nothing wrong with using cheap paint. I love to say stuff like that because I'm driving all my fellow painters, teachers, berserk, because berserk. Berserk, that's New Jersey way of saying berserk. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Uncle and Jim. Berserk. You know, alas, one of the issues, it's this way in any human endeavor, is once any of us has developed any facility, significant level of skill in any area of human endeavor, we are tempted to become, and most of us do yield to the temptation, to become snobs, right? We've worked hard, we've worked very hard. It's only fair that we should be able to, I'm being facetious here, it's only fair that we should be able to treat other people who don't have that same skill with some degree of contempt. I hope you understand. I mean, I hate this. I think snobbery is terrible. Now, I am snobby sometimes, but I usually try to remember to warn you ahead of time. Warning, warning. This is Dan Nelson about to be snobby. And then it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, of course. I hope, like I say. Really, snobbery is pride, that's all. Anyway, it's not a good thing. Anyway, so there's a lot of snobbery in the art world, just as there is in any other area of human endeavor. And one of the ways it manifests, the snobbery manifests, is like quality of paint. Oh, no. I am such a good painter. I'm such a good painter that I only use the very best, darling. That was pretty disgusting, wasn't it? All right. I don't like that. I think that's foolish and stupid and evil. Snobbery is always evil. Anyway, and again, if I ever slip into it, I'll try to apologize for it. So anyway, one of the ways that, again, that artists just manifest their snobbery is by saying, I only use the best brushes, I only use the best paint, I only use the best easels, I only wear the best hat. It gets pretty crazy sometimes, right? Well, darling, I'm a good artist, so I only wear, I'm trying to think of some kind of shoe. Adidas, Nike, whatever. Same thing, right? I'm bleeding over from one of my other areas of interest in my life has been distance running. I was a distance runner for many years, and yeah, so real good runners would say, oh no, I am such a good runner, I only wear blank shoes. Give me a break. Anyway, so I do like these silver brushes, but I do have a good many, I'm trying to find one here, cheap. Wait, that's a cheap brush right there. Your skill does not consist of the stuff you use. Think about it. Rembrandt didn't have a single brush that was as well made as the cheapest brush I have in my whole collection. He had to make his own brushes, probably, or had assistants do it. And we have all this stuff at our fingertips, made in China by Uyghur slaves. I always feel guilty whenever I buy anything made in China. I think of the slaves that were abused to make it for my pleasure. But all of a sudden I've gotten too deep, haven't I? I got too serious, a little too serious. I've got a little drawing issue I need to fix up here in the horizon. And I've mixed up a little bit of blue with my white now, just as a shortcut. So I don't have to do it in two steps. I can do it in one. Achieve a pale blue. There we go. This row of trees I had. Never mind, they were too big. Also, let's go ahead and do this. I just hadn't gotten to this little detail. There are a bunch of boats here. Solomon's Island boats, and clearly in this kind of environment, the the presence of these boats is a significant issue, right? Let's go ahead and do a little bit. I'm going to use a palette knife because there's a whole forest of masts back here. As you know, anytime you're at a marina kind of place like this, that's my description of the masts in this context. It's just a forest. Don't try to paint each and copy each one. Just put up a whole bunch of them, and you'll be better off than trying to carefully. I'm not going to count how many boats. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, that's ridiculous. I'm just going to get the feel. So I've got one boat up close here. In the painting, in the photograph, there actually is a boat right behind Joe's shoulder right here, but I do not like that one at all. That's just a confusion. Hope that's okay, Jim. That's just going to be open water. But I do like this boat, although in the photograph it's right here, and I moved it over there. Classic old. Is it a Chesapeake Bay? I don't know. I don't even want to take a guess. I'm not at all an expert on kinds of boats, but it's just a classic. Again, old. I would guess 60s, maybe even 50s. There's still plenty of them when I go to the coast here in North Carolina, which is where I'm usually at the coast, of course. There's still plenty of these boats at the dock in the water. And you can probably already tell just from that little bit of detail what kind of boat we're talking about. All right, so I've got that one, and then I've got a whole bunch of boats in the distance, and I think that's enough to convey the feeling of a coastal scene, right? I'm mixing up a pale greenish blue right now to give some definition to the water. So using an opaque color, which I'm doing right now, is sort of against my rules. If you found normally anything light that I do in the acrylic stage is opaque. White is white, and then I add, like if I wanted pale green, I would do green on top of it. But not terribly infrequently. Every once in a while, I'll use an opaque light color just as a time saving, really, so I can achieve the color I want in one step instead of two. And while I've got this greenish blue, I'm going to do some of her bouquet. Ooh, I like that. This is a nice color for some of the pylons, the posts in the water. And while I'm at it, let's go back. Jim, it looks to me like these are fall colors back here. I don't know if that's accurate, or what time of year was the wedding? I'll correct it if you get back to me. Leave a comment. Do you want those to be fall colors, or is it just green trees? And for some reason, I mean, these kind of look like fall. The weeds in the foreground look like either late summer, early fall too. So let me know All right, are we back? We are. Sorry about that. Okay, I will complain to you just a little bit. So the latest in-ear monitor that I've been using is this little thing. I like it because you can't see it. It's inobtrusive. I don't like it, turns out, because it falls out of my ear. So I reach up to push it back in my ear like this, and if my finger accidentally comes around and hits the front side of it, for some reason, it turns off all the sound. It turns off this, touching the button in my ear, which it's not supposed to do. It's just digital Bluetooth feedback spaghetti that's causing that to happen. So I'm just complaining to you about. Then you say, well, why don't you get a different kind of monitor? This is probably the 8th approach. You can say, why do you need a monitor? Because if I wasn't wearing a monitor, I wouldn't know it when I've lost sound. So twice today it's already helped. It's worked. Anyway, so there you go. That's just me bitching. Thank you. I want to get that off my chest. And then, as I said, I have to reboot a whole bunch of stuff and hook them all up in the right order. And I won't go any further than that. Believe me, it gets crazy. It absolutely gets crazy. I can't just turn it off and turn it back on. Oh, no. Wouldn't that be sweet? That's the planet you live on. The planet I live on, you have to hook a whole bunch of pieces of equipment in the right order. If you get them out of order, it doesn't work. So when you're a little bit irritated and rattled because you've just abandoned all your friends in a live broadcast, it's real easy to get irritated and rattled and hook up 4 different things not in the right order. Once again, I'm bitching. When I was growing up in my house, that was a naughty word. I don't know if it was a naughty word where you grew up. A lot of things were naughty words. Don't worry, I've recovered. I still don't cuss like a New Jerseyite, like a Catholic from New Jersey. Forgive me, you Catholics. There's a type. You know what it is. Love you. All right, so let's just do one more thing in this stage, and that is, let's start introducing a little bit of color to the flowers and so on that are on that trellis, yeah, whatever. And looks to me like pink flowers and blue flowers. So, okay, I'm not going to try to reproduce them one for one. That would be ridiculous. I just want to capture the essence of the decor, right? And I'm cheating here by using opaque color. Again, doing the same kind of cheating I was doing a little while ago. Instead of doing them white and then glazing pink, which is sort of, that's my normal method. I'm cheating and using opaque just as a shortcut, using opaque color. And so here's the blue, a couple different colors of blue actually, the couple blue flowers. All right, and then some green. I'll just add some yellow to what's on my brushes. So I have a green color to represent very roughly some of the leaves mixed in with the flowers. While I'm doing some green opaque stuff, I'm going to go ahead and capture a little bit of green that's in here. All right. So far, so good, eh? Looks like a Dan Nelson painting. Just a good thing. I'm Dan Nelson. Well, let's do some white on her dress before we leave this stage. So I'm getting, one of the questions, and I mention this often, but for those of you who are not regulars, how do I know when it's time to switch to oil? And the way I typically put it is when the drawing is almost right. I want to say perfect, except that will trigger some of you perfectionists, because as you know, you never get perfect. But anyway, when the drawing is essentially right, correct, when the colors are close to perfect, essentially correct, close, and when the values, okay, so I don't have to be, again, perfect, but when is it time to switch to oils? When the drawing, the colors, and the values are close. Okay, and I'm almost there. Not quite. Oh, good. And thank you, Jim, for answering my question. The wedding, those are fall colors. The wedding was in October. Thank you. And I'm sure you already told me that at some point, but I forgot. Let's make a little bit more sparkle on these boats back here. And likewise, a little bit more light in the sky close to the horizon down here. When I stood back mentally for my painting just a minute ago, now I'm going to stand back literally. Yeah, I find that that my values need just a little bit of work. So that's what I'm doing right now. Adding lightening several areas of the painting. And then I'm going to darken a few areas as well. By the way, that's a big drawing correction right there, that mark that I just made. It's like, oh, I made his hand, his sleeve was too far that way, so I've just moved it up. Again, just a little correction. Always, every time I draw it, I'm looking for things that need to be fixed. Oh, let me comment on that. I've talked about this before, but it's important. Isn't it bad, if someone might say, to have to make corrections to your drawing, by drawing I mean capturing accurately the objects in the paint. That's what I'm calling drawing. Isn't it bad? And when you do that, don't you have to like erase the bad marks? And the answer is an emphatic no. In fact, the mistakes, quote unquote, actually work in your favor. The struggle to find the exact right spot, say to put the top of this post pylon, the fact that it was here, then it's there, now it's there, and I leave residual marks from I don't try to erase or correct them, usually, only if they're really problematic, and that's very rare, very rare. So the answer is no, you don't erase them. Why? Because it turns out iteration would be the word. To iterate is to stop and start, right? The iterative nature of those lines actually is one of the most charming parts of your finished painting. The fact that you put it here and here and here, and you can still see vestiges of the earlier erroneous marks. you can see vestiges of Thelonious Monk in your painting. When I said erroneous marks and said, "Oh, that sounds a lot like Thelonious Monk." So there's vestiges of Thelonious Monk in your painting. All right, adding, going back and making sure that's a more October color in the trees back there. I like that. And I want some of that same, so I'm back to using opaque color at the moment. So at the moment I'm not focused on values as I have been for the last, I'm focused on color, and I'm, again, cheating, so to speak. I mean, it's a legal cheat, it's just not, it doesn't follow my normal principle. When I teach painting, this is not what I tell you. It's not what I tell you to do. We typically achieve a color by putting down white and then doing a transparent on top of it. Why? Because transparent colors are so much more pretty than opaque colors. More interesting would be a better word, of course, than the word pretty, of course. You get kicked out of any university art department for using the word pretty. Okay, I will not get off on that tirade. I've done it enough times. Okay, I'm gonna there's a little bit of darkening that I think needs to happen here and there, so I'm mixing up some sort of a neutral. This post I think needs to be darker, and I'm moving this. Here's some redrawing. I'm moving the edge of this dock was out too far. Moving it. That's a drawing change. That's a drawing refinement, of course, that I'm making all the time. Every time that I draw, I look for things that need to be corrected. I think I've made that point enough times today. What do you think? Somebody out there needed to hear it, I'm sure. Okay, this man, Joe has a beard, and just a hint of that here. A hint of eye. A hint of shadow on the face there. Anything else? Sure, a hint of shadow on the arm. Shadow on his hand. Let me step back again. Are the values now? Again, I'm being influenced, of course, by the photograph and looking at the values in the photograph, but I'm not obligated. I can make improvements on them. That's a funny one, by the way. In my teaching over the years of teaching live students, I try to avoid teaching dead ones whenever possible. The feedback is just not that satisfactory. Sorry. Anyway, when I'm teaching in a live setting, I teach that, of course, we don't have to reproduce the photograph, and then I find some students, breathing a great sigh of relief because they take it as an escape hatch because of their lack of drawing skill. So when I say you don't have to copy the photograph, and let's say it's a photograph of a boat, any kind of boat, like I was just painting a boat, and I say no, you don't have to reproduce it, and they go, oh, whew, and then they don't paint the boat. No, that's not what I mean. That's not what that means. The fact that you don't have to replicate the photo means that you're free to make improvements to the photo. You're not a slave to it. It doesn't mean you can eliminate stuff because you're bad at drawing it. All right, I know that's kind of stupid, and I didn't need to say that, but yeah, somebody out there needs to hear that. It's happened more than once. You know, it's like you're drawing a painting of a lighthouse and saying, now you don't have to copy the photograph exactly, so the student eliminates the lighthouse. No, that's not what I meant. You're free to make artistic, sensitive improvements to the painting. Doesn't mean you could take stuff out. Let's do the Mona Lisa. Without the Mona Lisa, I'm not that good at people. Oh, bless your heart. All right. Oh, not quite. I can do a little bit of white. When I finish the acrylic stage or the acrylic phase, white is the last thing I always do. The last thing is white. Again, because the first thing I'm going to do in oils is glaze color over the whole thing, glaze, a colored glaze on top of color. It's only going to get but so bright. So I want there to be plenty of lightness on the canvas, in the painting, so I don't suddenly find myself in a dark, gloomy setting, as I begin to do the finished oil painting. Okay, let me stand back. Am I close? Am I close enough to go to oils? Almost, not quite. And I'm missing. There's not quite. And of course, the photograph is reflective of this. There's not much energy or thing happening down here. So I think I need to add a little bit of darkening of some kind. Any color? Yeah, brownish green. So I think the painting would be better if there's a little bit more energy, a little bit more contrast down here. And there is a rock down here, so make a little bit more of that. Again, my favorite word for many of the decisions that I'm making in the painting process is energy. The question is there enough? It must be the right amount of energy at every point of the painting. Less energy toward the corners and the edges, of course. This will be the most energy will be on their faces and then their figures, and then everything else. There's not a right or wrong answer. It's like it's intuition. Is there enough energy right there? So what I'm doing right now is I felt like there wasn't the setup. There wasn't quite enough stuff happening down here. Some of you have heard I did a pretty big retrospective study of my paintings this past year, because early 2021, I went into my attic and pulled out literally, turns out it was 100 paintings from over the last 15 or 20 years. Lined them up along the railing upstairs, stacked 3 or 4 deep, of course. And it was very interesting and insightful, instructive to look at. Some of them were paintings I'd done, just in the last 2 months. Some were paintings that I'd done nearly 20 years ago. I'm not sure there was one of those, 15 years ago anyway. And I discovered some things about myself, and that was very helpful. I discovered that my paintings, using the word energy, my paintings have tended to fall off too far. I'm great at really capturing the focal point. What's the word? The opposite of sfumato, chiaroscuro. Like a Caravaggio painting, the super intense light. Rembrandt has some of this on the focal point, and then the rest of it goes to almost black. I have too much of that in my painting. Sometimes I think historically I'm great at focus, light, but then I've discovered I think it falls off too far. So that was very instructive to me. All right, I think that might be good enough. I'll tell you what, I'm going to do. Good. I have a piece of cardboard here. I'm going to do a little bit of, whoops, that's too much of a good thing. I usually reserve, palette knife painting for the oil stage, but in a passage like this where there's a lot of grass, I find it'll help me if I've got more hints of grassy energy already happening. I don't have to rely on so much on the oil phase, the oil stage for that. Again, the word energy is quite much in my mind when I'm doing stuff like this. How much energy, how much is too much, how much is not enough, and so on and so forth. I find that term, energy, quite helpful. Wait, do we still have sound? Whew, we did, okay. You fell out of my ear, and that's when I have lost sound a couple times this morning. The bride is always glowing in one of my wedding paintings. All right. You know what? I think I'm going to call it quits. I have other work I need to do today. Jim, thank you so much for the commission and the opportunity to paint your daughter. And Joe, there's a good chance I'll be back tomorrow. Let me see if there's some comments I need to address before I leave here. Well, hello, Barbara. Let me expand this out. So good to hear from you. Love seeing your work. I don't do Facebook nearly as good as I should, but when I do, I'll often see your work. Barbara Pask, ladies and gentlemen, you should go see her work. She's excellent up in Ohio. A fellow Ohioan. Go Cleveland Browns. And Tiago D'Agostini says, using the non-dominant hand to make something like the eye placement. Yes, absolutely. Want to be a better artist? I can turn you into a better artist in 3 seconds. Use both hands. Done. All right. Foxhole. That's hilarious. Yeah, there were people working back there. Exactly. Yes, Uncle. I have thrown out a couple paintings. That's only because I'm building up courage to throw out some more. I have done here just before I leave today. I've done several broadcasts in this past year where I was improving old paintings, and I do think that those are probably some of the most instructive YouTube videos I've ever done, because they address issues that we all struggle with. This is one of the paintings. I have not worked on it yet. One of the other things that I discovered about myself by doing this accidental retrospective study in this past year, I discovered that I'm an introvert painter. That is to say, I don't put people, I don't like people in my paintings as much as I should, which is ironic because of course I paint festivals and I'll put hundreds of people in my paintings. So I'm not afraid of painting people, but this is an example A couple years ago, I jumped in the car. I wanted to do some real plein air painting. Took this big canvas out and did this. Actually, this has been retouched at least once, maybe twice already, and I really do like it. It's a lovely painting, a little bit like Robert Wood. Now that I look at it, oh my goodness, that's kind of embarrassing. Nah, that's a snob statement. Robert Wood, American. He's kind of like the Thomas Kincaid of the 1960s in America. Anyway, I discovered that this propensity for not doing enough people. And this painting in particular, doggone it, this painting would be significantly improved. And so it's sitting here in my studio. I'll do a broadcast, almost certainly I'll do a broadcast of this, improving this painting, which for me, not you, but for me, means including people. And I already know I want to put a boy walking this way with his dog behind him. So, Coming Home. And maybe I'll change the title to Coming Home. There's some, again, I think some lovely aspects. When I went out looking, I was particularly looking for majestic old oak trees like this to paint, and indeed, I feel like I found a good tree and I did a good painting of it, and so on. And for me, nature is rarely satisfactory. I want nature plus the straight lines of architecture. And since I painted this painting, they've since torn down this building, which disappointed me because it was a better scene with this old shed still there. Anyway, so I am going, now it's quite a trick, as you can imagine. It's going to be quite a trick putting a boy in here, because if I'm not careful, it'll look like I stuck them on like a postage stamp, right? That will not do. So because my paintings are done in many, 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 many layers, when I make an addition like that, I have to do that in several layers too. And of course I can't start in acrylic because this is oil. So it'll be a slow process because I'll have to do some messy stuff in oil and then let that dry and then do layers and layers. But I think a dog and his boy, I don't think that's too sentimental. I think that's, anyway, I won't go any further on that. All right, so that's a little detour at the end of Jim's daughter's painting. He's saying, what the heck, this is supposed to be a video, this is supposed to be a broadcast about my daughter's wedding. I'm sure that's not what you're thinking. Oh yeah, paint myself. There you go. Paint an old bald guy walking through. Old bald guy with a sore knee walking through the yard. All right, now been fun. Thank you, gang. Thank you again, Jim. I hope to be back tomorrow to proceed to take up oils. Okay, see you then, y'all.